Namaste to all of you. Let's start our Gita class, Sunday's Gita class with some mantras. Om Parthaye Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayan Swayam Vyasena Grathitam Puran Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advait Amrit Varshini Bhagavati Mashtadashadhyayane Am Tvam Anusandhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshine नमो अस्तु ते व्यास विशाल बुद्धे फुल अरविंद आयत पत्र नेत्र येन तव्या भारत तैल पुनः प्रज्वलितो ज्ञानमय प्रदीपः प्रपन्न पारि जाताये तोत्र वेत्र एक पाने ज्ञान मुद्राए कृष्णाए गीता अमृतुहे नमः सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोगदा गोपाल नंदना पार्थो वत्सा सुधीर भोगता दुग्धम गीता अमृतम महत वसुदेव सुतम देवम कंस चानूरमर्दनम देवकी परमानंदम कृष्णम वंदे जगद्गुरुम भीष्म द्रोण तटा जयद्रथ जला गांधार नीलोत्पला शल्य ग्राहवती कृपेन वाहने कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थाम विकर्ण घोर मकरा दुर्योधन अवर्तने सो तीर्ना खलु पांडवै रन नदी कवर्तका केशवा पाराशरे वत्सरोजमलम गीता अर्थगंधोटकम नानाख्यानक केसरम हरि कथा संबोधन अबोधितम लोके सज्जन षटपदैर रह पे पिये मानम मुदा भूयाद भारत पंकजम कलिमल प्रध्वंसी न श्रेयसे मूकम करोति वाचालम पंगुम लंघ्यते गिरिम यत्कृपात् महं वंदे परमानंद माधवम यम ब्रह्म वरुण इंद्र मरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यस्तवे वेदे सांगपद क्रमोपनिषदे गायन्ति यम सामगा ध्यानवस्थि तद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यम योगिनो यस्य अन्तं न विदुसुर असुर गणा देवाय तस्मै नमः. This is Bhagavad Gita class and we started the chapter number 8, Akshar Brahma Yoga, last week. And we ended our class with verse number 6 and 7. So actually we did go through the 7 also, but 7 is a continuation of 6 because it starts with the Tasmat, therefore. So let's look at 6 also. He says, whosoever at the end leaves the body thinking of any being, to that being only he goes, O Kante, because of his constant thought of that being. So predominantly where our mind has been throughout our life, that's where it will be towards the end of the life too. So what he is suggesting, because goal of human life is what? To merge with the Supreme. So that's why he's suggesting develop a God consciousness as your inner nature. Constantly remember God. So Lord must be remembered, recollected, and contemplated upon at every moment of our life. This is Lord Krishna is telling us to do. Forget everything else if you need to. Remember God. But he's not telling us to forget everything else. He says, keep on doing your duties, but remember me. Remember God. Okay, but if we think that we cannot do 2 things, which one to choose? Remembering God. Remembering God. So choose the higher. Let go of the lower. So he says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmar yudhya mayarpit manobuddhi mam ev eshyasi asanshyam. Therefore, at all times, remember me and fight. That means do your duty. With mind and intellect fixed in me, that means absorbed in me, you shall doubtlessly come to me again. So very simple instruction by Yogeshwar Krishna. How can we improve the standard of our life. Constantly we worry about standard of living. But he says standard of life, evolve. Okay, keep your mind. And this is not difficult. This is not impractical either. If we pay attention, no matter what we are doing, our mind is not 100% absorbed in what we are doing. It's somewhere else also. So if it's going somewhere else, bring it to God's memorization. That's what he's telling us to do. There is a very famous saying by Sant Kabir. In old times, the village ladies, they will go to the well or the river to get some water. And the water was carried in those earthen pots. So Sant Kabir said, Sumran ki sudhi yon karo, jyon gagar panihar. Bolat dolat surti mein kahe Kabir vichar. So in simple English language, it means remember God, just as the village woman remembers the water pot on her head. Because she knows that she is carrying that water pot. She never forgets that water pot on the head. In fact, they become so proficient in it, they don't even hold it. They just keep it so steady on the top of their head when they are taking the pot of water. So remember God just as the village woman remembers the water pot on her head. She speaks with others. So she's talking to the other ladies and walks on the path. But her mind keeps holding onto the pot. So the main thing is the pot should be held steady on the head. But she's talking to the other women. She's walking also. So he says, Sumran ki sudhi yon karo. So that's how just your main thing is to remember God. Main thing. So this is where we ended our last week's class. So basically what he's telling us to remember this theory, as you think, so you become. If you think about God, slowly you become God. If you keep on thinking about the world, you just stay absorbed in the world. And what is in the world? Ups and downs, lot of kicks. Few moments of happiness, most of the moments full of worry. And what is in God? Only the bliss, nothing else. It's only homogeneously, only one thing in God. And he's telling us to just keep your mind on that. So when we have a constant awareness of God, when we have a master mind like that, what happens? Our actions become selfless. Because remembering God, it's very easy to make all your actions selfless. So actions are soaked in selflessness. We don't even think about it. Am I doing a selfish action or a selfless action? When you're remembering God constantly, all your actions become selfless. This is the outcome. Actions soaked in selflessness. And what happens to our thoughts? Because what is God? God is nothing but love. So our thoughts are soaked in love. No matter whom we talk to, because thoughts are full of love, we will talk lovingly. They are soaked in love. And what happens to our feelings? Feelings are matured in kindness. This is what happens to this kind of a personality. Feelings are kind, thoughts are love, soaked with love, and actions are selfless. And what do we call this kind of a person? A yogi, a rishi, a Muni. So Lord Krishna is making us that with these instructions. Now let's look at verse number 8 today. Abhyas yog yukten chetsa na anya gamina paramam purusham divyam yati parth anuchintayan. Abhyas yog yukten. Constantly engaged in remembrance. How? By the practice of yoga. Okay, so make your habit. Abhyas is something you keep on repeating. So habit of thinking about God. Chetasa, with the mind. Na means not anyagamina. Without deviating. Do not let your mind go anywhere else. So moving towards any other thing. Na anyagamina. Do not take it anywhere else. Paramam Purusham. Supreme divine personality. Divyam. The divine resplendent. Yati goes or attains. Partha, that's Arjun. Anuchintyan, meditating or constantly remembering. Anu means even a small portion. It's like a moment to moment. Remember God. Anuchintyan. With the mind not moving towards any other thing. The minute it starts to go somewhere else, bring it back. Bring it back. Remember God. So with the mind not moving towards any other thing, made steadfast by the method of practice of yoga, abhyas yoga, and constantly meditating on the Supreme Purush. Oh, Partha, he says, if a person does that, he goes to him. Whatever we think about, that's where we'll go. So he says, keep on thinking about God. You'll go to God. And this term death, when we look at it, sure, at the end, this body has to go back to the nature, the Prakriti. But even while living in this body, if we keep on thinking about God, it's like an ending of this egocentric personality. When we end this, what we'll do? We'll just go to God. We'll keep on thinking about God. So we got to train our mind. Mind has been trained to go into the stress and the worries of the world. So abhyas really means the practice, training and habituating of the mind to meditate upon God. That is abhyas. This kind of a practice is to be done. Sure, first we try to do it at the fixed times, in the morning, in the evening, or maybe in the afternoon, with the regular intervals. But eventually it should become continuously. That's what he's telling us. Along with all the day activities of life. All the time. Cooking, cleaning, taking a bath, walking, doing exercise, whatever you are doing. Just take your mind towards God. With this kind of an integrated mind, whatever that individual meditates upon intensively must come to gain it soon enough with this kind of a practice. So anuchintyan. When the mind is attached to God, what happens? It gets purified. Whatever is attached to, the color of that goes into the mind. Okay, so when the mind is attached to God, it will get purified, even while performing the worldly duties. And we'll see that Lord Krishna again and again gives us this kind of a teaching. In the same chapter, 14th verse, he will say, Ananya Cheta Sattam. Then in chapter 12, Mayeva Mana Adhyasva. Then chapter 10, Tesham Satata Yukta Nam. So it is the mind which needs to be engaged in devotion. It is the mind which needs to be surrendered. So that's the point he's trying to make for us. Because most of the time what we do, we go to the temple, or we even sit in meditation, body is doing it, mind is roaming around. So he says, let the body do whatever it needs to do, but the mind should be at the feet of Lord, connected with Lord, no matter what you are doing. Now the question is, who is this God? What are the qualities of this grand Purush, which is talking about Paramam Purusham, Divyam? Who is this divine Purush? Because if we are supposed to constantly remember something, we got to know who is it, what is it, what are the qualities. In the next verse, we see 8 qualities of the Supreme Lord, which we can meditate upon. Because it's easy to meditate on something or connect with something when we know the qualities. Okay, even in this world also, if somebody says, think about this person, we like to know what the name of that person is. Or how does the person look like? Then we can say, okay, show us the picture. So over here in this verse, Lord Krishna is giving us 8 qualities of the Supreme Lord. That doesn't mean he's defining it all, but he's just trying to tell us. He is giving us some pointers towards the divine Purush. Kavim Puranam Anushasitaram Aniyansam Anusamretya Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam Aditya Varnam Tamsa Parastat. Kavim. Kavi means poet also. Kavi means omniscient also. Puranam, ancient. Anushasitaram, the ruler, the controller. Anu means, see, Aniyansam. Aniyansam means minuter or smaller. Anu means than the atom. Okay, smaller than the atom. Anusamret, always remember. Ya means who, that means that person. Sarvasya, of all, everything. Dhataram, nourisher or supporter. Achintya Rupam, one whose form is inconceivable. Aditya Varnam, effulgent like the sun. Tamsaha, from the darkness. Prasad, beyond. Beyond. Whosoever meditates upon the omniscient, the ancient, the ruler of the whole world, minuter than the atom, the nourisher or the supporter of all, of a form inconceivable, effulgent like the sun, and beyond the darkness of ignorance. So these are the 8 qualities. When we attach our mind to any of these, we don't even have to have all of them, any of these, our mind comes into divine realm and becomes pure. Any one of these 8. Because in the preceding verse, it was vaguely hinted to contemplate upon God, the supreme resplendent Purusha. So that's why Lord Krishna, as a great guru, he's just further explaining it to us. These qualifying terms, as again, I'll emphasize that these are just the indications of the truth. They don't define, we cannot define God. They're only the indicators, only the pointers towards the truth. No single term here is to be understood as complete in itself. Sure, together we can have some idea, but don't think that one term will define it, or all of them will define it. That's why they say to define God is to define God. We cannot define God. So contemplation upon the reality is to prepare a mental condition so that our mind becomes well integrated. So that mind turn inward. It can just pause for a moment from the outer finite experiences. So let's look at each word separately. The number one is omniscient, kavi. Omnisciency does not mean knowing all thoughts of all people, at all times, at all places. Implication of this omnisciency is a lot more than that. Sure, God knows what's happening, but it is a lot more than that. The infinite self being one everywhere. That means it is the same principle that illumines all the different embodiments. All the thought experiences at all times. That means my thoughts, your thoughts, anybody else's thoughts, who is illuminating it? God is illuminating it. That is omnisciency really means. Just like the sun, people say sun is seeing everything. Sun, because it illuminates all the objects in the globe. It's like a diviner principle of awareness. So the same way, no knowledge is ever possible without God. So he's called Kavi. Kavi, omniscient. See, the biography of this word Kavi is also very interesting, because it has come down from avenues of time. If the self be Kavi, omniscient, then the knower of the self, who becomes the self, is also to be considered as omniscient, Kavi. So that's why the rishis who have written those Vedic mantras, they are called Kavi. So knower of the self becomes the self. That is the idea behind it. Okay, so omniscient. So God is omniscient. Then the second term he says Puranaha, ancient, most ancient. Why? Because the eternal truth is that which was before all creation. Before this creation or any kind of a creation, God was before that. It remains the same. So it doesn't change. Creation changes, but the creator doesn't change. So God is the origin of everything, spiritual also and material also. So ancient. He was before anything else. And the third pointer he's giving us, Anushashita, the overruler. So God is the creator of the laws. Because of those laws, the universe is running, but he administers these laws also. He is the director, and he is the one who appoints all the celestial guards. So everything is under his regime. That's why overruler, Anushashita. Okay, so it's like this principle of awareness. It's not just presiding, but it is ruling very effectively everywhere. Just like when we see any pot made out of mud, we say mud is everywhere. So with the mud parts, without the mud parts cannot exist. Without gold, the gold ornaments cannot exist. Without the ocean, the waves cannot exist. And without the sweetness, the candy cannot exist. So that's why God is overruling everything. Anushashita. Then he says, Ano ani yansam, minuter than the atom. So the simplest and the smallest physically divisible particle of any element God is even smaller than that. So God is in the smallest of the smaller portion. So self is the subtlest of the subtle. The subtler a thing, the greater its pervasiveness actually. Subtler the thing. So that means God is all pervasive. There's no place where God is not. See, the grosser the thing, it's limited. As it becomes subtle, from the gross to the subtle, to the subtler, to the subtlest, God is the subtlest. So it means it pervades all, and nothing pervades it. Nothing else is subtler than God. It is the most subtle. Okay, so this is what it means. Ano ani yansam. Then the next term he uses sarvasya dhataram. That means nourisher of all, sustainer of all. See, just like we say ocean is the sustainer of all the waves. Waves cannot exist without ocean. The same way, he is nourishing and sustaining everything. So if it's not constantly illuminating the ever-changing flux of the things and happenings around, if it's not there, nothing will happen. It's sustaining it all. It's almost like the screen in front of us is sustaining our pictures on it. Our pictures can go back and forth. Some students might turn their picture off. Some are on. But what is sustaining it? This screen behind it. Screen behind. So that's how the God is that sustainer of all the changes. Achinte rupam, form inconceivable. Because our mind, which is made out of material nature, can conceive only material forms. God is beyond the scope of the material mind. Only by his grace, he becomes conceivable. So it's not that we cannot comprehend him, but with his grace, we'll be able to comprehend him. Can be apprehended when these equipments are transcended. The limited equipments, the body, the mind, the intellect, the ego, when we transcend that, sure we can conceive, but we cannot conceive it with the help of this material mind. So finite cannot conceive the infinite. Okay. Then he says, Aditya Varnam, luminous like the sun. Aditya means the sun, luminous. Conceiving the inconceivable, knowing the unknowable, understanding the understandable, or experiencing the inexperienceable. He is defining the God as an instrument of the cognition, experience, apprehension. There's no equipment available to us. But at the same time, this is like a light. Aditya Varnam. It's like a light. So it's almost like in order to see the sun, no other light is necessary. In the dark, we can say that, yeah, I need the candle light, or I need the bulb light, electric light. But when the sun is up, we don't need any light. So God's light is like that, Aditya Varna, luminous like that. It's a self-effulgent, self-evident. To know this absolute, we don't need any other knowledge or any other light. Aditya Varna, effulgent. And it's functioning in the self, functioning everywhere, all the time. Because he used the word Aditya over here, the sun. We know that sun, there's a darkness also at certain part of the globe when the sun is on the other side. And some people might think that maybe there's a darkness when God is not there. But God is always everywhere. So to remove that doubt, he says, Tamsaha Prasad. It's beyond all darkness. There's no darkness at all. Sun, we think that it's a setting and there's a darkness, there's a light, night, but God never sets. Tamsaha Prasad. So to remove these ideas from our mind, that means the self is not a variable in nature. Sun can be variable. Sun can have clouds in front of it. So sun is there, but we don't see the sunlight. But God is always there. So it's never absent. So the very limitation of the sun, meaning the darkness of the night, is negated when Lord Krishna says that this Supreme Purush is beyond the darkness of ignorance. Beyond that. And he who meditates upon this Supreme Purush is the one who goes to him. So all these 8 different qualities which are mentioned over here, we can meditate on any one of them. Kavim Puranam Anushashitaram Ano Anyansam Anusamretya Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam Aditya Varnam Tamsaha Prasad. A very powerful verse, beautiful verse. Now, in the next few verses, he is giving us further instructions. And these instructions are about bhakti. Because thinking about God with this kind of a devotion in your mind. He says, Paryan kale manasaha achalen bhagteya yuktaha yog balen cha eva bhruvo madhye pranam aveshya samyak satam param purusham upati divyam. Paryan kale, at the time of death. Manasa, with the mind. Achalen, unshaken, steadily. Bhakteya, full of devotion. So with love, thinking about God with love. Yuktaha, united. Yog balen, by the power of yoga. Cha means and, ev means only. Bhruvo. Bhruvo means the 2 eyebrows. Madhye, in the middle. Between. So between the 2 eyebrows. Right over here, the 3rd eye, which we call. Pranam, the pran. the main pran. Aveshe, fixing or having placed. Samyak, completely, wholly, thoroughly. Samyak. Sa means he, tam means that, Param means the Supreme Lord. Param Purush, Supreme Lord. Upati reaches Divyam, divine. At the time of death, with an unshaken mind, full of devotion, by the power of yoga, fixing the whole pran between the two eyebrows, he, that means the seeker, reaches the Supreme Purusha. So he is telling us how to do our practice every day. Because we don't know when we're going to leave this body. These yogis, they have taught us, even while doing the yoga, we do the shavasana. Learn to transcend this body. Even while working on the body, learn to disidentify from the body. During meditation also, the yogi guru says, transcend the limited aspects of your personality. I'm not the mind, I'm not the body, I'm not the intellect. I am the soul who wants to join with the soul. And now over here, another technique he is giving us. Bring the pran into the middle of the eyebrows. The pran. Main pran. We are all familiar with the subsidiary prans also. But he's talking about the main pran. And main pran can go up there if we know how to do the pranayam. That's why pranayam is considered the soul of yoga. Otherwise, we are breathing. The second we were born, we started breathing, and we'll keep on breathing until the last breath we take. But if we don't pay attention to it, how we are breathing, and what is this breath, learning to control and do it systematically, that's a pranayam. So you can see that all of those elements are part of this practice. Again, bringing it up. When we try to bring our breath up or the pran up, we need to keep our body straight too. Keeping the body straight. That's also part of yogic practice. So at the moment of death, again, I would like to emphasize at the moment of death, it's not that when we are ready to leave this body, we'll be able to practice it. No. We have to learn to leave this body every day. Detach from this body every day. Let go of the awareness of this body. This will function, it will keep on functioning. Don't be afraid, but practice this every day. So he's in this section of the Gita, he's describing the single pointed meditation actually, because we talked about meditation earlier too. Now single pointed meditation, while bringing the devotion in there too. Paryan kale manasa achalen bhaktya yuktaha. Yog balen, use this strength in you. Yog bal. Understand it, practice it. And the term bhakti, sometimes we really get confused with the term bhakti. We think only the rituals are bhakti. Rituals should take us to this correct bhakti. And what is this correct bhakti, I mean? Selfless love. Seeking a fulfillment in itself. So that means that loving God, just for the sake of loving God. It's not loving God for something to get from God. That's not bhakti, that's a business deal. So selfless love, seeking a fulfillment in itself, when we direct this kind of a love towards the divine with firm faith, only then it's called bhakti. So that means these kind of emotions got to go towards God only. Love God for the sake of loving God, not love God to get something else from God. We got to have that kind of a bhakti in our mind. And Lord Krishna says, this kind of a bhagat is very dear to me. Why? Because I am so dear to him. In this world also, anybody who loves us, we love that person back. Always a little exchange. The same way with God also, if we love God this way, completely, wholly, selflessly, then God will love us back too. And that is the goal of life. So very important suggestion is given here to a meditator. And he is using the word yog bal over here. So it's not some kind of a secret, mysterious strength. This strength is acquired by a meditator when a meditator meditates upon the Supreme regularly for a long period of time. This is a yoga bal. It's the strength of the yoga, power of the yoga. It's almost like an inward strength. He's not talking about a physical strength here. It's an inward strength, almost like I would say inward fire in a person. And that keeps on growing. This fire, the heat of this fire, we have talked about in other classes. The heat of this bhakti is so immense, which can burn all the vasanas. Heat of this kind of a bhakti, this kind of a love. So when a person is engaged in meditation, sure, initially you might feel all the prans, your apan also, saman also, your vyan also, udan also. But he is telling us just to focus on the pran, bring the pran over here. It doesn't need little practice, daily practice. And that's where we get the yoga with the love also for God. And the practice also, he's saying abhyas. Abhyas is needed. Okay. So making a commitment that I am going to do this every day. And then we'll see next week. He's introducing the meditation upon Om in the following verse. So first he's telling us bring the pran over here, then meditation on Om. So we'll start with the next class with verse number 11. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you very much for coming.